Hi, I'm James Taylor, Business Creativity and Innovation Keynote Speaker, and this is The Creative Life, a show dedicated to you, the creative. If you're looking for motivation, inspiration and advice while at home, at work or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's an author, musician, entrepreneur, performer, designer or thought leader. They'll share with you their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, and much, much more. You'll find show notes for this episode as well as free training on creativity over at jamestaylor.me. Enjoy this episode. Hey there, it's James Taylor, and I'm delighted to have on the show today Gordon Stannis. Gordon brings a unique perspective to the world of innovation. He is a partner and director of design and strategy at Twisthink, where he specializes in unlocking exciting new business value for clients. How do they do this? Well, by using human-centered design to uncover strategic insights and apply emerging design and technology trends and capabilities. He's worked with Fortune 500 companies such as Whirlpool, Stryker, Horwath, Crown Equipment, Lutron, and many, many more. For nearly 2 decades now, Gordon and his team have devoted their time to creating the ideal user experience to help their clients to become market leaders and grow. And it's my great pleasure to have Gordon with us today. So welcome, Gordon.
Thanks very much. Happy to be here.
So share with everyone what's going on in your world just now.
Business is great. Companies are investing in innovation. Companies are investing in developing IoT strategies, which is a specialty of our firm, and we're feeling the robust economy. Oftentimes, customers are like birds on a wire; they wait for each other to jump and shift position, and that jump appears to have happened. And nobody wants to be first, but nobody wants to be last. So that's the behavior we see corporately from year to year.
And you're in a part of America I always think as being, a bit of an industrial heartland for the US. Actually, it's a beautiful part where you're based. So when a lot of people think about innovation, they think of kind of Silicon Valley, West Coast things, or even advertising. They think of maybe New York. Where are you based, and why did you decide to base the business there?
We're the other West Coast. So we're on the sandy shores of a beautiful freshwater sea called Lake Michigan, and kind of like the best kept secret of the Midwest. My friends in New York, when they come here to visit in the summers, they say we live in the Hamptons, and without the crazy property taxes and so forth. So it actually is, the quality of life standpoint, it's an extraordinary place to live. I've lived in LA. I have 5 different places in LA, and I love it, and I visit, and my friends still live there, and I love going back, and I love traveling to San Francisco. I've probably been there 20 times, and we're able to do a lot of the same work. We hire from the same schools oftentimes, and we kind of fly under the radar. We're not we don't have the giant marquee, but we live comfortably in between the 2 coasts in our, what we call the third coast. The third coast, wonderful. Now, a question I'm guessing you might be asked a lot is, these Fortune 500 companies that you work with a lot of the time, why would they bring in an external team to work with them on innovation when they might already have an in-house innovation team? Great question. In fact, we recently codified a slide on our introductory presentation deck for this reason, because we've noticed that people come to us, there's about 6 different archetypes of sort of modes that people are in when they come to us. They range from highly strategic on the left to highly tactical on the right, and someone on the far left could be coming in. That archetype could be, hey, I've heard something about this HCD thing, and I really just want to learn more. It keeps popping up in my trade journals. Or, hey, I've heard about Twisthink, and I'm just really curious what you guys do. The other end of the spectrum is, I just need more bandwidth. I have people who do what you do, and I just don't have enough of them for a season of time, and I need you to run alongside of us for a month, a quarter, or a year, and then everything in between. So some of the clients that you've worked with, I think I probably use a few of your products, and I didn't even know that you're involved. I know one I use all the time is, I think you have the Hilton Doorkey. If anyone uses the Hilton app,
There's a little Doorkey app there that's being introduced a lot. So that was something I know that your team worked on. So you've kind of got that the more technical app side. But actually, the one I want to speak to you first about, because I'm fascinated by this, and I love there's a TV show we have here in the UK where they go into factories and show how individual factories work, whether it's that the Heinz baked beans factory, all these different factories, and it's fascinating to see how these factories work. And one of the clients that you have is Crown Equipment, and they had a unique challenge in their business, and you worked with them on a piece around innovation, and you got pretty amazing results. I saw some of the stats that came out. So can you talk about, first of all, the initial meeting that you had, what the initial brief was, and how you went about finding a solution to that challenge?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. First, I share your fascination for what happens in manufacturing facilities and distribution centers and in infrastructure-oriented places, because these are all hidden. And I think that's why that TV show is still running, called How It's Made, and it shows you how cookies are made and engines and other car parts and building components. And I think we have a natural fascination with things that we see every day, but we have no idea how they get there.
Yeah.
So a lot of the products that we design for customers are consumer facing. They're things that will sit on a shelf, or you can buy through Williams-Sonoma online and so forth. And we take a lot of pleasure in those. Those are kind of like the slick, glossy, retail, business to consumer oriented design challenges that we're faced with. But a lot of the work that we do is B2B. And so you've identified Crown Lift Truck, which is a great client of ours, a fantastic company. They have a legacy of design and business excellence. And they encountered a problem over a decade ago. They're very safety conscious. They're leaders in industry in so many ways. And they don't beat their chest and say things like we're the safest truck or anything like that. Only Michelin Tire and Volvo are two of the outliers of brands that actually lead with that story. Most companies just do it, and they just do it quietly, and they do it because it's right and it makes good business sense and so forth. So Crown came to us and said, we've got a problem. We have these certain type of lift truck that's been around for many years. It's called a picker truck. And we're encountering some problems because the people who drive these trucks aren't paid by the hour. They're not pacing themselves and working as slowly as they can throughout the day. These men, and they're like athletes, because they're moving and lifting all day long really fast. They're paid by the load. So their incentive is to work hard and work fast and get out of work early and go fishing with their kids if they can, if it's a good day. And so the net effect of that incentive program is these folks are driving these trucks and they're hopping off before they come to a complete stop. And that causes pretty significant downstream problems, like somebody could slip and fall and twist an ankle. Somebody could slip and fall and run over their toe, and a 4-ton lift truck is not kind to a toe in a situation like that. Or worse, even they could run into racks, and these racks, you've probably seen videos of dominoes in million-square-foot warehouses tipping over one at a time, and it's a big mess, and it's potentially deadly to other people in space. So the design challenge was, how can we solve that safety problem? How can we keep people from jumping off trucks before they've come to a complete stop? So we spent a lot of time and energy. The typical tenet of human-centered design is, don't assume you understand the problem. Get in and discover all of the dimensions of the problem. So that's what we did first. So we immersed ourselves in this world, and we interviewed people, and we did observational ethnographic research, and we watched what was happening, and that provides insights. That's the fuel for innovation, as the insights derived from the discovery phase. And we started to see some interesting things that led us to conclude that the best way to solve a problem is to avoid the problem. So these people are getting on and off these trucks hundreds of times every day. If we could minimize getting on and off the truck, we minimize the problem entirely. So cutting to the chase, the solution that you see is this glove. So we're remote control driving a 4-ton object and walking behind it. And if you're walking behind it, you're not jumping off of it, and it's not going to run you over. And it has a laser guidance system that keeps it straight in the rows, and you're just walking behind it, loading the truck. So the insights led to some epiphanies, which we're pretty confident in our ability to design really great IoT wireless infrastructure products. We created a bulletproof system with many levels of redundancy, so the dozens of lift trucks that are operating simultaneously in the space won't cross-contaminate each other. You can imagine what kind of a problem that would create. And so Crown's the only company that can bring a solution like that to the market. And there is this amazing side benefit, and we see this all the time with IoT solutions. We set out to solve problem A, and we successfully solved problem A. And we did it by creating this new technology capability. Lo and behold, this new technology solves other problems. There are side benefits, tangential solutions, one of which was the fact that these people weren't getting on and off the truck so many times actually saved 70% of footsteps, up to 70% of footsteps. Think about that per worker per day globally.
Wow.
Think about worker wellness, and think about longevity and aging workforces and all that kind of stuff. Profound effects. And the net effect of this whole solution is our customer Crown is reaping the benefits of solving the safety problem and improving the wellness scenario.
So I would love to know, so that, the obvious way that you would have thought someone would have tackled that problem is thinking, okay, do we have, when the person jumps off, maybe the engine stops and all these different things, but fundamentally people are still thinking of human being sitting on machine. Where did the bit come from? And actually, what about if we didn't even have them sitting on a machine? What about if the human being was walking alongside or going behind or walking alongside this thing? Where did that idea come from?
It was a pretty bold thought. It was on that idea. Luck favors the prepared mind. So we had just finished several other projects of remote control. Now, those weren't 4-ton objects, but you walk before you run, you build your confidence. And it's because of past projects that our collective imaginations even allowed us to go to that new place. Because I'll confess, where we started was a very different place. We actually, and it's kind of embarrassing to admit this, we started with the idea of little cattle guards that are deployed when the truck is moving, and when the truck comes to a halt, those little cattle guards go up and allow people to get off the truck. And we thankfully realized that workers would not respond favorably to being locked into their vehicles. Workers would, we wouldn't blame them if they took a chainsaw to those little cattle guards to remove them so that they could get to work and quit being treated that way. So we realized quickly that that's not a genuine solution. It might be a knee-jerk reaction. It's kind of looking down on your workforce as opposed to uplifting your workforce. And imagine the difference if we had launched the cattle guard solution versus the one that saved 70% of footsteps and completely obliterated the safety problem.
So this goes back to
it's night and day.
You mentioned that this idea of a human-centered design, and that's obviously lots of different innovation firms out there, and they use different things. So for someone that hasn't heard that term before, human-centered design, can you just explain what was the background to this, and how do you often see it being used?
Sure, happy to. Just to use colorful language that might be memorable, one of the terms that we use when we talk about HCD, human-centered design, is that it's an anti-arrogance principled process. It's not a process like you check boxes and you go from step 1, 2, 3, and you don't have to keep thinking, you just execute it. It's not like that. These are principles, and they're fundamentally grounded in the belief that problems are more complicated than people think. People are more complicated than people think. And we need to take the time to understand the problems and understand the problems' roles in people's lives. And if we do that, if we're thoughtful and rigorous and patient, these beautiful insights will percolate up, and we will see them, and then we can seize on them through analysis and collaborative co-creation and product development.
So I'm wondering, as you're talking about this, what is the role of ego in a team, and especially in an innovation team context? Because you see, let's say the way that media portrays, the great innovators or creatives, they have the big egos and maybe prima donnas there. Where do you see the role of ego? Is there a role for ego at all in a firm like yours, where you're working more in that kind of collaborative concept?
So I'll give you two ends of the spectrum as answers to that solution. I'm glad you brought this up, because ego is important. We believe as a firm that if we don't have, someone once said that a true test of intellect is the ability to have two conflicting ideas in your mind at the same time and be okay with it. Mm-hmm. So one thing we talk about often with our teams is that we are absolutely useless if we do not come to the table with a point of view. Now, our point of view could be misinformed and wrong, but we've got to have one. We can't just sit there passively and nod and, not really have a firm conviction. So we have to have a point of view. At the same time, we have to believe that we could be wrong, and we have to constantly seek new information to either strengthen or weaken or change that point of view. So that speaks to ego. And one of my favorite lines I've ever heard about ego is Paul Hewson, Bono of U2, said, "The ego's not always the enemy. It's like a small child crossing an 8-lane highway on a voyage of discovery." I couldn't possibly put it any better than that. So ego isn't inherently bad. Ego is on a journey. Ego is searching and seeking, and has the courage to attempt running across an 8-lane highway. So we want our people to have, our team members and our customers to have egos, but at the same time, we want 50% of their weight planted on that foot, and we want the other 50% planted on human-centered design principles of ask, seek, and knock. Talk to the people who are actually going to use your products and get to know them really, really well, and understand their problems and solve their problems.
So another client I've noticed, as I'm doing this interviews now, I'm sitting on a Hermann Miller chair, and that's I know it's one of your clients as well. That's a classic brand, classic company. I don't know when the first Aeron chair was first designed, but what was a brand like that? You would think, well, that's a company, they're going to have loads of designers in-house. Why would they come to an outside firm to help them with innovation? What was it that you were able to kind of bring to the party?
Fresh perspective. Our team is doing things that their team isn't doing or wasn't doing at the time. And so if you think of, and I've studied Hermann Miller. I mean, as a designer, I kind of study all of the top firms. I've been doing that religiously for decades, and Hermann Miller's right in there. And what they're so great at is they're great at conceiving and creating and developing artfully functional products. And like attached to that, inextricably linked to that, is physical products, not digital products. There has always been a glass ceiling of the physical, and they've never really, prior to us working together, they hadn't really tried or succeeded at breaking through that glass ceiling. And I'm using language that we and they used together 5 years ago when we embarked on this journey. So they came to us with an idea, kind of like Crown came to us with this, hey, we've got this problem / opportunity. Can you help us? Can you sit with us and help us think through the true nature of the problem and imagine new solutions? Hermann Miller did the same thing. And they had this idea of how to make chairs smarter, how to give chairs intelligence, how to help chairs coach people to use them better and adjust them properly, and so forth. And so we embarked on that journey. I don't know if you're when I don't know what Hermann Miller chair you're sitting on, but it probably had a hang tag when it arrived in your office.
Yes.
And you probably ripped the hang tag off the adjustment knob, the torsion spring adjustment knob, and you probably glanced at it for a solid minute and tried a few things, and then you quickly binned that hang tag and moved on. Well, that's a problem, because if your chair is not adjusted properly, you could actually get hurt. You could damage nerves in your hamstring area. You can develop neck and shoulder tension. You can have all sorts of problems if you're not adjusting your chair properly. So the big idea was, how can we use sensors, microprocessors, and some form of communication back to the end user to adjust a chair better to that person, right? That just starting that journey and beginning that journey opened up a whole new realm of other things that could be done and maybe should be done sooner and first. And so we pivoted away from the big idea of the chair, and we attacked the height adjustable table.
Which is a very kind of popular thing at the moment. A lot of people realizing that they should be standing more rather than sitting. So I could see how that was a natural move as well.
Well, and the beauty of the height adjustable table is it already has power, right? So if you're going to put sensors in it, and you're going to put a microprocessor on it, and you're going to allow it to chirp to the environment, and think of hundreds and thousands of desks, this thing already has AC power, so it can do that all day, every day, without having to have batteries changed and stuff like that. So there's a general belief that height adjustable tables are healthier for people. There's a general knowledge that they cost hundreds of dollars more than non-height adjustable tables. And there's a general curiosity about whether it's worth it to spend the extra $500 to $700 to add that height adjustable capability. When you're buying 5,000 desks at a time, that number adds up pretty fast, right? So that's how we pivoted and realized that there was a more compelling, immediate opportunity to add intelligence to a product, and that's the height adjustable table. And these tables, they know when a person is standing in front of them versus a dog or a chair or a plant, because there's a sensor that's tuned to the heat signature and scale of a person. So it has that level of intelligence. And if you set your phone down on it, it knows that it's you and not someone who's a foot shorter than you or a foot taller than you. So when you go to adjust it to standing height or sitting height, it goes to your version of standing height and your version of sitting height. And so it's delivering some immediate benefits to you as an end user. And if it sees that you're sitting a little too long, it'll gently vibrate and sort of prompt you to wake up and become self-aware and stand for a while. And if you're standing too long, that'll prompt you to take a break, because standing all day is not the goal either. So that's how we're serving that stakeholder. And there's a whole series of other stakeholders that get served by the data.
So this is interesting, because we're now, it almost feels we're on this cusp at the moment. Obviously, this brings in Internet of Things, connected buildings. I was in a hotel the other morning, somewhere. I was speaking somewhere abroad, and I woke up in the morning and I automatically asked Alexa, "Can you put on the bedroom light?" And when nothing happened, I felt really disappointed. I thought, "Oh, I'm in a dumb hotel room."
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. You feel like you're in a dumb space, right?
Yeah, you're in a dumb space. And I can see, actually, even more so, I would say, when I see a lot of children interacting with environments, they're so used to having some of these things and the interactivity that when it doesn't happen, it's kind of a little bit jarring. So it does feel like we're on this cusp of moving from dumb spaces to smarter spaces. And that Hermann Miller case is one of those examples.
It's one small step toward that goal. And I was just contemplating Star Trek, of all things, a couple of days ago, and how 30 or 40 years ago, people were walking up to doors that were immediately opening and closing behind them, like airlocks, but they were motion sensor enabled, and how there was ubiquitous computing. You would just stand in a space, and instead of saying, "Hey Alexa," you'd say, "Computer, answer this question for me," and you would open up a flip phone, and that turned into the Motorola StarTech. And a couple of days ago, I read that someone has, you remember the tricorder from Star Trek? There's a prize for, and it's a multi-million-dollar prize for someone who can bring that dream space to life, where you have a device and you have an external, we call it an edge device, a sensor that's used for medical purposes, and you can wave it just like Bones did over a colleague, and it was feeding information into the tricorder to diagnose something. And it's so great that Hollywood's unencumbered by actually having to produce something and do the hard work of figuring out how to make things do what they want them to do. They just create the vision, right? And here we are 30 and 40 years later, still trying to bring many of those visions to life. And I would say Alexa in the last 5 years is the closest thing that we had seen to ubiquitous verbal computing or VUI computing.
So that case of the Hermann Miller, what can anyone that's listening to this just now that maybe doesn't work at a firm which is considered like a design leader, maybe like a Hermann Miller, what could they be learning from what you did there with that brand in terms of thinking maybe around Internet of Things or just thinking about in terms of general creativity or having a more innovative mindset? What was any kind of key takeaways that when you just speak to other organizations that you say, listen, we found this is something that we found in the process of designing this product with Hermann Miller?
So a recent study by Harvard Business Review, not too recent, maybe it's within the last 5 years, determined that only 9% of public and private corporations in North America have an ongoing innovation process. And baked into that statement is a human-centered design or design thinking investment, a perpetual investment in those two modes of working. And what that means is that the other percentage of organizations aren't talking to their customers the right way. That's a huge indictment. What we recently learned from a McKinsey report in Q4 of last year is that 40% of companies do nothing. They still literally do not talk to their primary, secondary, and tertiary stakeholders. That's shocking because those stakeholders have all of the insights, all of them. Not some of them, they have them all. And if you're not talking to them, you're getting none of the insights, right? And then what's kind of worse is there's this gray area in the middle that's roughly 40% of organizations, 45% of organizations that are actually talking to their stakeholders, primary, secondary, and tertiary, but they're doing it the wrong way. They're doing it, it's one thing to not do something, because then you're not wasting money. Well, 40+% of organizations are actually wasting a ton of money chasing their tail, going in the wrong direction, because they're doing completely unproductive, old-fashioned focus groups that has been proven to be grossly ineffective. They're doing surveys, and they're asking people to, visualize a complicated user experience, and then circle put their pencil to the circle or click the circle of mildly or somewhat or extremely, and try to translate complicated user experiences into sentences and circles. That's not normal.
Yeah.
And so what we all know what people do, they hate those things. They don't believe in those things. They just want to get through it as fast as they can. So they bang them out as fast as they can, and they usually go right down the middle. And then teams of people look at the data, which I would put a smiley face next to the word data, because it's not useful data. It's a farce. And then they try to make business decisions based on that, quote unquote data. So to answer your question as succinctly as I can after that long preamble is deeply engage with your customers and ask them a lot of questions, and don't tell them anything. Let them tell you and listen to it. And then once you're done with that, that's called the discovery phase. Spend a lot of time. It's not a meeting, it's a phase. In the analyze phase, and that's where you draw meaning, you draw conclusions, you cluster the insights that you received in the discovery phase into something that's strategically and tactically actionable, and you start the create phase. You create a new offering based on that. it's foolproof.
Yeah,
It's bulletproof.
It's that, that idea of asking questions. That reminds me of that quote, the Voltaire quote, which is judge a person by the quality of their questions, not their answers. And
Yeah.
I think it's harder as you get further up in organization, because you're expected to have all the answers, and the questioning bit of you can that questioning muscle can become a bit weaker with lack of use. So it's great that you have organizations like you that are coming in, helping. Asking those questions and deeply engaging with the customers. As we start to finish up here, I would love to know, are there any online resources or tools or apps you find particularly useful for doing the type of creative work that you do?
I think we all move through data so fluidly these days. There isn't a specific place that I personally go to. I'm just like a shark swimming through an ocean of information and data, just like the next guy. I think there's one thing that could help is this. First of all, that was a great quote, and I'm going to use that sometime in the near future because I love it. And it reminds me of a great Abe Lincoln quote that I just recently heard that goes, "I don't like that man. I must get to know him."
Oh, that's a great one. That's a wonderful quote.
So it's so succinct. Take out the word man and just say customer or stakeholder, or how often do you view your customer as a problem, right? If you start thinking of your customer as a problem, that's a problem, right? So oftentimes we have those feelings because we just don't understand, and the best way to understand is to ask better quality questions and invest ourselves. One of the greatest epiphanies that we've had as an organization in the last 5 years is this understanding of the difference between service and hospitality. And there's a restaurateur in New York City. His name is Danny Myers. He's actually written a book, and he's become extremely popular in the last 6 or 7 years. But 6 or 7 years ago, when I first walked into one of his amazing restaurants called Gramercy Tavern, I had an experience walking out. I couldn't figure out what had just happened. My head was spinning, and I'm kind of a foodie, and I try to reverse engineer experiences so I can understand how I was just tricked into loving something, and I couldn't figure out why I had a level 10 experience, and I didn't know if it was the food or the service or the ambiance or the music, smells, go right down the list. And it turns out this guy had written a book, and it's called Setting the Table. And it explains his life journey as a restaurateur. He's actually the guy who launched Shake Shack, and the whole case study of where Shake Shack came from and what it is now is worth investing in too, because it's all about prototyping and testing and failing and growing and learning and never giving up. And innovation is it's not for the faint of heart. It is kind of like Rocky stepping into the ring and getting punched in the face 50 times before he really galvanizes his mettle and decides to go in for the kill. And that's what innovation is like. You take a lot of hits in the early stages, but they're essential to craft your point of view so that you can do a great job. So I would encourage everybody to check out that book and be inspired by the radical difference between service, which is a commodity-oriented word and idea, and hospitality, which is all about surprise and delight. It's all about perpetual growth. It's all about that Maya Angelou quote. I've learned that people remember what you said and what you did, but they will really remember how they made you feel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it. So we're going to put a link there to the Danny Myers book. Great suggestion. I'm looking forward to reading that one myself as well. What about an album? If there's one, I mean, you live in a part of the world, you have a place like Detroit, not too far from Chicago. If you were to recommend one album that you think our listeners should check out, what would that album be?
An album, as in like a music record?
Yeah, a record or an album, or even a song.
Oh, okay. My favorite song is Landlady by U2, which is the last in a series of homages from Bono to his wife Ali. It's an extraordinary double album, by the way. The last tour that came out, and it's an extraordinary song on the last album. And what a lot of people don't know is that the idea of the two albums as bookends was conceived half a decade ago. And after the our recent election debacle of 2 years ago, they had to press pause and redo that album because it was no longer socially resonant, because things weren't as optimistic as they had looked when they had previously conceived of the album. So here's an example of innovators, and I would say that these are master collaborators, master innovators, pivoting because of the sign of the times, and retuning their output. We have to do that all the time too.
Yeah, funny. I just watched, there was a program the other night about Queen and Freddie Mercury, and one of their tours, which was 1977, a US tour. Well, punk had just happened by that point. And so you actually heard, they recognized that actually there's a more aggressive style of music happening now. Those big rock operas, they're starting to go out of favor. So you actually heard their music change as they started experimenting with much harder kind of sounds as well, because the punk influence was starting to come in with what they were doing as well. So Landlady by U2, we're gonna have that link there as well. And
so Queen was benchmarking, is what you just said. Yes. And we all have to do. We benchmarking is kind of obvious, and what we counsel our clients to do is allow us to do adjacent benchmarking with them and for them, because we don't live in silos. We live in the whole world all at the same time, and things could be happening in automotive or fashion or consumer goods that could affect a medical product. They affect our expectations of user experiences. And so we need to let those things cross-pollinate each other.
And a final question for you, Gordon. Let's imagine you woke up tomorrow morning and you have to start from scratch. So you have all the skills, all the knowledge you've acquired over the years, but no one knows you, you know no one. What would you do? How would you restart things?
I would focus on the most important thing of any organization, and that is team, and assemble the right team. So just as the bands that we just talked about, they were only able to do great things because they had a great team. And you know, your earlier question about ego and so forth, there are people who think that they catalyze a team. Like, I'm the big energy source and I walk into a room and I catalyze this team and we do great work together. What is more interesting and appropriate to me is teams that co-catalyze each other. And I don't just mean like our firm, Twisthink, and our great team. I mean, we have to co-catalyze with our clients. So we have to get in a room together from scratch and figure out a way to fast track high functioning collaboration. Because there's a huge spectrum of collaboration where we endure each other on one end of the spectrum and we thrive together on the other end of the spectrum. And you can imagine the outputs of those two ends of the spectrum are going to be radically different, right? So one of our number one jobs is to figure out a way to create that thriving atmosphere and co-catalyze and co-create as a team and do things none of us ever thought we could do at the start of a project.
And if people want to connect with you, learn more about Twisthink and some of the other projects that you're working on, the clients that you work with, where's the best place for them to go and do that?
Our website's a great place to go, and I thank you for asking that question. If you go to twisthink.com/create or creative, there you can see all sorts of things like case studies and blogs, and some of the things that we just talked about today are going to be evident there. There's a tool that we created out of necessity a decade ago called a VRT, which stands for Visual Research Tool, and we have it trademarked. The name's trademarked, but we tell everybody about it because we think it's the best way to engage with clients on a discovery journey. So we explain how it works, and we encourage everyone to, theft is the greatest form of compliment, so go for it and use it. And there's another dimension to a story called usability, desirability, and I would contend that any product, service, or experience that you've ever loved, personally, that you've ever loved, is a blending, a balance of usability and desirability. We have seen extremely competent, usable products fail in the marketplace because they weren't desirable, so nobody noticed them and nobody bought any, and it's shameful and pointless and heart-wrenching to see that happen. What's even worse is when something looks really desirable and it lures and tricks people into purchasing it, and it doesn't deliver on its usability. That customer tells 10 friends to stay away from that brand. And that's a surefire way to tank an organization. So we focus with our customers on the 10 types of innovation, and also on balancing usability and desirability. And all that stuff, in fact, our usability desirability blog goes live this week.
Wonderful. And we're going to put links to all of this for people who go to jamestaylor.me. Just type in Gordon Stannis and you're going to find all the links that we've been talking about today. Gordon, thank you so much for coming on today, sharing all your insights on innovation and also the creative process as well. I wish you all the best with the clients that you're working with.
Thanks, James. This was a pleasure talking with you, and hope you have a great day too.
If you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.